Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
We passed over a destroyed land. You have not seen it, do not know what hell looks like. We can have today only one purpose, and that is to see this thing through to the end.
Meanwhile, in the Ardennes, the Americans have recaptured the initiative, moving step by step back over the lost ground.
Soon I noticed the tank shells were coming right over my head, along with trace of machine gun bullets. It was a foggy night, so at first I couldn't see the German tanks, but as dawn started, I could see a number of German tanks maneuvering around about 200 yards in front of my position. I soon ran out of mortar shells, so I asked by radio for some more from battalion headquarters in a manor house about 400 yards to my left. To my welcome surprise, 2 men from battalion came running with large numbers of new shells in a cart. The German tanks seemed to know we had a mortar position, but they couldn't see it in the foggy conditions. Another phone call said one of my mortar shells had landed in a German tank and blown it up. After a few more minutes, I could see that a German tank was going along our front line and firing directly into the foxholes. I kept firing because I was very concerned that German infantry troops would soon be able to advance to 200 yards towards my position if I didn't stop them. I got word on my phone that German tanks were in battalion headquarters. And that was, of course, Arthur S. Couch, 2nd Battalion, 26th Infantry Regiment.
Who was born in Louisiana, but then moved to New Jersey.
Well, you know what? That's one of the things I admire about America, is it is a place where you can do that.
I'm quite into that Deep South thing because Daisy and I have been watching True Detective.
Ah, right. Well, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, to episode 6 of the Battle of the Bulge. Just like to let the listener know that, like the Battle of the Bulge itself, this podcast series has sprawled and bloomed and blossomed and burst its bounds. We thought we'd be done within 6, but here we are at the defence.
On 6, we're only on the 19th of December.
Exactly. 3 days in.
I know, but the most complicated bit is at the beginning.
Yes, and the sort of where all the contingency lies and where the moments all hang is in.
Yeah,
is in
and
the
what
first.
the heck's, in fact, what's going on?
Yeah, we will attempt to explain.
Of course, of the surprise German attack, which has caught a lot of people off guard on the Allied side, and with very good reason, as earlier discussed, has prompted some quite serious high command decisions.
Yes,
it's also prompted Eisenhower, who is the Supreme Allied Commander, of course. You know, he's been accused of not sort of gripping the whole show quite enough, in being a very good diplomat, but not really kind of, letting all his subordinates just sort of slightly do their own thing. And what you see here is him definitely sort of taking command slightly at Bradley's expense, I would say. But anyway, he holds a meeting at Verdun, scene of epic French-German First World War battle, on the 19th of December. And this is the 12th Army Group's rear HQ. So forward HQ is in Luxembourg. Yeah. But the rear HQ is in Verdun. And obviously that's just easier for everyone to get to. So Ike is there. Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder, who is the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander.
Yep.
Omar Bradley, the commander of the 12th Army Group. Jacob Devers, commander of the 6th Army Group. Don't forget them, coming in from the south, Operation Dragoon on 15th of August 1944, etc. And Patton as well, and also Hodges, who is the 1st Army Commander. And Ike says, the present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us and not of disaster.
Yes, which is very, very interesting, isn't it? Because, as you say, he's been accused of not being particularly grippy. But even from the 16th, when he first looks at it, he thinks, this is it. This is a big proper offensive, doesn't he?
Yeah. So Patton suggests letting the Germans get all the way to Paris, then pinching them out and surrounding them. So he swans into this meeting with enormous sort of braggadocio. Yeah. And Eisenhower is quite irked by this.
Yeah.
And says, look, giving some ground is one thing, but the Germans under no circumstances cannot be allowed to cross the Meuse, because what he understands that Patton doesn't. I imagine it's just showboating on Patton.
Yeah, of course it is.
But what he realises is that psychologically, you just simply cannot suffer reverse on that scale. No. However, attractive on one level that might be. And just imagine what that means if sort of half of northern France is overrun by the Germans having been liberated. Imagine what's going to happen to all those civilians when they go into villages and stuff with Das Reich and so on. It's just absolutely inconceivable. So he says, no, you can give a bit of ground in Belgium and stuff, but no, you absolutely cannot do anything more than that. And they cannot be allowed to cross the mighty River Meuse. So it's agreed that 6th Army Group is going to push up into Alsace, which is why Dives is there, because how they're going to kind of redeploy all their forces is important. Basically, what there's going to be is going to be a shift northwards. So part of Patton's Third Army is going to shift northwards and try and help and come in on the southern part of what is evidently becoming the Bulge. And that means 6th Army Group also taking up some of the slack. But that's okay, of course, because what's completely clear by the 19th of December is that the bulk of German strength is now here. So you can afford to slacken off in other areas, knowing that you're not going to suffer much of a reverse there. And so that's why they're able to do that. So Patton suggests he can start right away, which also irritates Eisenhower, because you just can't start right away. You can't start on the 19th because you're expecting an entire corps of 3 divisions to pivot 90 degrees. Because they're facing eastwards and they've now got to face north. And, as we explained in the last episode, that's just not that easy. What he doesn't want is Patton's forces heading off half cock and going straight into Brandenburger's German 7th Army. Yeah. So they agree that he'll spend the next few days manoeuvring, and then the actual start, the jump off, will start on the 22nd of December.
Yeah. The thing is also that, the situation within the Bulge itself is unclear. A lot of this is like best guessing, isn't it, as to what the situation actually is 3 days in, or 2 days in, really, if they're meeting on the morning of the 19th. I think he's absolutely right to take stock, because the Germans might blow themselves out in the meantime.
Yeah.
Given what they know about the state of them. I think it's interesting.
And also, it's about making sure you balance and always being on balance and making sure you don't get kicked through the back door. So yes. Anyway, at this point, Eisenhower has just been given his 5th star. So he's that would be Field Marshal in British terms. So there isn't a rank of Field Marshal in the US Army. No. So Ike says, every time I get a new star, I get attacked. And Patton goes, and every time you get attacked, I pull you out. You could just imagine how annoying Patton must have been at this particular meeting.
Yes.
It's great that he's so gung-ho. It's brilliant that he's so up for it.
However,
but can you just wind your neck in?
Mate.
But also there are further moves ahead, because the 21st Army Group, the British Canadian 21st Army Group, is to the north of the Bulge battle. And Montgomery, now Field Marshal Montgomery, by the 19th of December, is really pretty disturbed by what's going on just to the south, and also by the complete lack of news and lack of comms coming from 1st Army, which is immediately on his southern flank. Well, no, there's 9th Army, isn't there? Then 1st Army.
Yes, but still.
So he sends off some of it. What he does is, as you know, he sends off his liaison officers, his young captains, and he sends 2 of them off to US 1st Army HQ. And one of these is Carroll Mather, who we've talked about a number of times in the past, who was formerly in one of the Guards regiments and then SAS, and then joins Monty's headquarters before Alamein.
His brother's also been one of Monty's guys, and it's a family connections thing that gets you that job. Yeah.
Anyway, they reach 1st Army headquarters only to find it abandoned, and sort of like Marie Celeste with sort of half-finished meals and all the rest of it. On hearing this, Monty immediately orders the SAS and the Phantom Recce teams to head to the west bank of the Meuse, and also puts 30 Corps immediately on standby, because what he wants to do is make sure that the western bank of the Meuse is protected.
Yeah.
So Carroll Mather and his fellow liaison officer then head off to 1st Army Rear HQ at Chaudfontaine, where they do find General Courtney Hodges. But Hodges seems completely out of it. Yeah. He seems completely shaken by what's happened. He's not speaking coherently, doesn't seem to be in touch with 12th Army Group either. And when they drive back and report to Monty tells them to immediately go back to Hodges and tell him to block Liège at all costs. And Liège is the biggest town. It's right on a bend, a kind of a northeastern bend of the Meuse. And it's the sort of closest large town on the Meuse towards Antwerp, which is the ultimate German aim.
Yeah. Monty's tooling around in a Rolls Royce, isn't he?
Yes. Yes, he
turning up in a Rolls Royce and, making his presence felt, which is interesting because he feels that there's no command presence, that there's a vacuum. And he's right, actually.
Well, Monty reckons that the problem is that Bradley has decided not to pull back from Luxembourg City, where his forward advanced headquarters is. Yeah. And he's kind of now isolated because he's to the southern part of the Bulge, and there's now the Germans sort of in between. For Bradley and his staff to be able to get to First Army, you have to go all the way around what is now the Bulge. And that's not very practicable, and it's not great for communications because although they have radios and telephones and all the rest of it, that kind of personal confrontation, that personal mano a mano kind of approach is really important still. So Monty thinks that Bradley is now not able to effectively command First Army, and so suggests to Major General Whiteley, who's the senior operations officer at SHAEF, or senior British operations officer at SHAEF, which is Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, to tell Ike that he, Monty, should be put in command of all Allied forces north of the German salient. Whiteley is not a fan of Monty in any shape or form, it has to be said, but does recognise the kind of logic in this. Whiteley then suggests this to Bedell Smith, who is Eisenhower's chief of staff, who does agree with Whiteley too after some consideration. And then Bedell Smith rings Ike, who also agrees, partly because he recognises Bradley is strangely off form at the moment. For example, he hadn't taken any steps to reinforce the Meuse front, as Monty was suggesting, and just as Ike had earlier told him to do. But also from a practical point of view. So Ike decides that the dividing line should be from Givet on the River Meuse to Prüm, which is actually now behind German lines, which is basically the Lochheim Gap, to all intents and purposes. Bradley, when he's told this on the evening of the 19th of December, initially agrees, but then overnight changes his mind and gets into one of his Bradley strops. I mean, he can be quite moody, old Bradley.
Yeah, he can, yeah.
He does have his moments for chucking his toys out the pram. And
he's one of the people you wouldn't want to get bollocked by. He's one of those people. And I think he knows he's been wrong-footed here. Because after all, on the 16th, it's him that says, this isn't a proper offensive. It can't be, because there's nothing strategic in it. He's wrong, isn't he? So he's got this problem where he's been proven wrong. Yeah. His boss has overruled him. You've got other characters like Patton showing up saying what they think. I mean, he's exposed, isn't he? I mean, because there's two American reactions to the Bulge offensive, aren't they? One is decisive action. The other is sort of trousers down, headless chicken aspect. Ike's the former, and Bradley's got more of the latter in him, I think, at this point.
Yes. But what is absolutely clear is firm, well-gripped command control is required at this moment. Yeah. And Monty is very much the man to do it. Anyway, around midnight on the 19th and 20th, Carroll Mather is again sent back to First Army headquarters to see Hodges and put him in the picture. He's taken instead to see Major General Bill Keane, who is Hodges' chief of staff, who is much more on top of matters than Hodges is at this moment. For whatever reason, Hodges is clearly a bit done in. And he's done in by the horrors of the Hurtgen Forest, which we discussed in an earlier mini-series, where he just sort of slightly loses the plot. I mean, Hodges is a very good sort of trainer of men. He had a good reputation. He's a good kind of dotter of I's and crosses of T's, sort of safe pair of hands or whatever. But the sort of general impression of him is he's not very imaginative. And when things go wrong, he's not particularly agile in his ability to kind of grip the situation. Keane is of a slightly different kettle of fish. Anyway, so with Keane, Mather goes off to wake up Hodges. Hodges sits up in bed with a blanket around his shoulders. And Mather, who is a sort of young 20-something captain, is really shocked by just how out of touch Hodges seen and seems to pass the buck to Keane on every single thing. And Mather says, on the important questions of the Meuse crossings, General Hodges had nothing to say. He implied that it was of no great consequence and had been or would be looked after. But, this is clearly the number one concern of both Eisenhower and Montgomery for very, very good reasons. So the slightly kind of sort of comsar, lackadaisical sort of response to this by both Bradley and Hodges is not great. And what Eisenhower and Monty are doing is filling that command void left by that lackadaisical kind of slight approach.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it shows that, yes, Bradley's right. There is no point to any of this. So you could argue, well, it's going to peter out anyway. We'll resist it. It's going to peter out. But Ike and Monty know that actually what you really, really need is someone to say, It's okay, I'm in charge. The leadership is confident of what it is going to ask of you to do. It's confident in itself and all that, and not that it's dithering and can't make its mind up. And I think what we've seen in the last 5 episodes is when you go right down to American platoons like Lyle J. Bouck, is if someone's in charge and someone's showing the way and someone's got a firm idea of
the situation in
gripping the situation
is much beloved by British High Command.
Yeah, exactly. If someone knows what they're trying to do, they'll get stuff done and they'll hold this up. Whereas if it's this sort of, Mather saying he implies there's no great consequence or had been or would be looked after. It's kind of fine. Maybe it has been or maybe it would be looked after, but you've got to make the moves to show that it has. So much of this level of command is about showing what you're trying to do, showing your people around you that you're in control. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is this LO system that Montgomery operates is incredibly effective, if only to create that impression.
Of lots of people busying around and being on top of the situation.
Turning up, and, because they have a letter from Montgomery giving them the right to go absolutely anywhere in his command and ask anyone any question they want to. And that means, as well as the existing nervous system of the army, they're like a sort of second set of eyes and ears. And I think it's really interesting that as he rolls this out with Hodges' people, they don't mind. They're like, actually, it's great. Someone's in charge. Someone's showing up.
I just want to be led.
Someone's showing an interest in us.
Well, I think that's right. But I think also it is, what Monty and Eisenhower both instinctively understand is that the Meuse is a red line. Yeah. It's a line that cannot be crossed. And it's a massive obstacle. I mean, the River Meuse is huge. At Liège, it's flipping wide. Yeah. At Dinant, it's flipping wide. I mean, it's got to be 100 meters across or something. I mean, it really is a big old stretch. And, you need that plan B. Anyway, Mather gets back by dawn on the 20th, briefs Monty, who then sends out a further 5 LOs, including 2 American ones, to find out what's going on. They head off in new kind of pinky suits, which have been issued to tank crews because it's freezing cold. Same morning, Ike rings Monty and tells him he's now in charge of the whole northern half. Yeah. Monty then later rings Beadle Smith and suggests they sack Hodges. He says, I'm not going to sack him. It's not my place, but I really think this guy's absolutely hopeless. Beadle Smith asks him for 24 hours. And the following day, Monty says, actually, I quite like Hodges being there because he's such a damp blanket. It means I can boss it without someone in telling me, kind of being an opposition to me. So Hodges stays. He gets a stay of execution.
Classic.
Bradley's in a difficult situation because he hasn't pulled back from Luxembourg, which perhaps he could have done, but he felt that would send the wrong signal, which he probably would have done. Luxembourg isn't a target in Herbst-Nebel, the German offensive. But obviously he doesn't know that.
No.
So this is the right decision, I think, for the scenario that's come about. Bringing Monty into it, you are going to get decisive decision making. That's the point.
Yeah, well, he's having the time of his life.
He's loving it, absolutely.
Because things are
coming to the rescue of the Americans.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, pure Monty catnip. But actually, it's a situation in which he does really well. He's suited to this situation, is the thing.
Yeah, that's a T-shirt, isn't it? With a big map of the Bulge with Monty's head above it, just going pure Monty catnip. I'll wear that next time I'm in the US. Anyway, meanwhile, of course, the battle is still raging. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about is what happens after. We talked about the twin villages and how the 12th SS attack was blunted. But instead of pursuing the line of attack up to the Elsenborn Ridge, instead, 12th SS are sent slightly southwards to Bütgenbach, and particularly Domain Bütgenbach, which is a farm, which you can't see anymore because it's now covered by a reservoir. And on the evening of the 18th of December, so 24 hours before all this command stuff has been going on at Verdun, etc., Gruppenführer Hermann Price, who is the commander of the 1st SS Panzer Corps, orders the 12th SS to shift their direction southwards. But this shift is slow because they've had to pull back through the forests through whence they came, and now have to go all the way back south again and up the Lossheim Graben, just as when we were over there, Al, you and I had to drive that really long way round to get round the Krinkeltenwald.
That's right.
That big forest.
Which took forever.
So this is exactly what 12 SS have to do. The problem with going up the Lossheim Graben is that everyone else is being up the Lossheim Graben, and it's a dirt road rather than a tarmac road. Yeah. An asphalted road. Yeah. So obviously it's pretty badly churned.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're doing a big detour, that's eating into your fuel. So again, there's endless issues there. I mean, in the meantime, the 26th Infantry, who are part of 1st Division, Big Red One, they've been hurried south and they now hold the approaches to Bütgenbach. They've been smashed up in Aachen and Hürtgen. So, but, it's all hands to the pump.
Needs must.
Yeah, they're deployed east of Bütgenbach with the 2nd Battalion on the hill overlooking the manor farm of Damana Bütgenbach, which is what the Americans call Dam Butenbach.
Just good old standard, know where you are, Midwest.
And there's a great big fight to come here, isn't there? And this is supposed to be covering Piper's left flank, isn't it? All this.
Well, it's supposed to be a thrust all of its own. So yes, it is. But Piper's obviously got a little bit further ahead than 12th SS. But really and honestly, this is part of the main thrust. And let's not forget that 6th Panzer Army is the main effort in this battle. They've been blunted at the Elsenborn Ridge. So what they're doing is they're sort of, okay, well, what's the next southernmost route? And this is where they are. But they're not getting very far because they're being blocked by the 26th Infantry of the Big Red One. So on the 9th bulk of 12th SS reached Bullingen, which is, again, one of those villages that we've already mentioned because Piper's been through there. And they reached there overnight on the 18th, 19th December in 3 separate Kampfgruppen. And at 2:30 a.m., the first 12th SS attack is launched by Kampfgruppe Kuhlmann of 12 Jagdpanzers. So this is Panzer IV chassis with a fixed gun. From Panzer Jäger Battalion 560 and 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers, which are the infantry of the 26th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment. They're launched 700 yards only in front of the Americans because it's night and it's dark and there's thick fog. And, anyone who says the Germans don't attack at night is
I was just going to say.
Yes, they do. But of course, attacking at night comes with all sorts of problems, which is no one can see anything. Whereas you can from you get these sort of flashes of light coming up, which obviously is quite blinding. And you can also do the whole kind of, searchlight trick, artificial daylight and all the rest of it. But even so, it's a murky old business. So the 2nd Battalion of the 26th Infantry fire illuminating rounds and mortars and call in the artillery. And artillery and small arms together stop the 12th SS attack absolutely dead. They get absolutely nowhere. And of course, in addition to this, several of the Jagdpanzers get bogged down too. 3 Jagdpanzers break through and do reach the manor of Dambutenberg, but then get whammed by long toms. So 2 of the 3 are knocked out, and the attack just peters out, leaving 100 dead and 3 Jagdpanzers burning. And the impression this gives to me is one of utter chaos.
Well, chaos and also it's all very well being a Kampfgruppe pieced together, but Jagdpanzers are, the 75mm anti-tank Panzer IV Jagdpanzer. The job of that, it's not an assault tank, is it? It's for dealing with armour. It's an ambush tank for dealing with armor. So they're in the wrong role. So it's going to go wrong. And as you say, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. Oh, the Germans don't attack at night. Oh, yeah. Actually, they do several times in this story.
Yeah.
And it's,
well, they have to because we've only got 8 hours of daylight.
Exactly. Yes, I mean, if you're late to your start line, the chances are you'll be fighting into the night anyway.
Well, exactly. Anyway, German artillery, they then pull back. The German artillery then kind of pounds the American positions, but not as hard as the Americans pound the Germans until about 10:15 in the following morning, by which point it's the 20th of December. Attack is then led by half tracks of Panzer Grenadiers and armoured cars, but these are knocked out in quick order, and the Grenadier attack is hammered again by American artillery. The pattern is already emerging very, very clearly that blocking positions by the US infantry with forward observation officers calling in the artillery makes it incredibly hard for the Germans to break through in the attack because when you're attacking, you're exposing yourself. The second attack is launched from Bullingen, but again, 2 Jagdpanzers are knocked out and the attack falters again. By this time, the Hitler Youth Division are already struggling with ammo shortages. And the problem, of course, is getting them to the front through these incredibly churned up roads. And, the Lossheim Graben by this stage is so rutted that actually the sides of the road are now kind of on a level with the kind of engine bays of the Panzers.
Yeah.
So it's dropped about 4 foot to sort of, quagmire of mud. Anyway, at midnight on the 20th, 21st of December, the Hitler Youth commander, Hugo Krass, he reinforces the front positions with Kampfgruppe Kuhlmann and with the remaining available Panzers and Jagdpanzers. And once again, they're immediately pounded by US artillery. So the main thrust is from Bullingen, second assault from Morschek. 5 Jagdpanzers break through the infantry and trench lines, shooting up positions and grinding the trenches. And they then do make it through to the manor farm of Bütgenbach. But the Grenadiers are behind, and without infantry, the Jagdpanzers, which don't have a swiveling turret, they are a tank destroyer, they are a self-propelled gun rather than a tank, are attacked by bazooka teams and absolutely hammered. 2 are knocked out, 2 more pulled back, 7 others get stuck in the mud. It's all over. So fighting is all over by 5:30. US infantry hold out, shortages now in bazooka rockets and anti-tank mines. Everyone's short of supplies, because if the Americans are short of supplies, then the Germans are doubly so.
Yeah.
Casualties on both sides is extremely high. This is proper, bitter, no quarter given, furious night fighting, incredibly confusing. Total losses for the Germans, 12 Jagdpanthers that night. Jagdpanzers, rather. Jagdpanzers, not Jagdpanthers. Jagdpanthers, Panther chassis with an 88mm gun. Jagdpanzer, Panzer IV chassis. Further attacks again, 6 a.m. that morning. Let's give another go. If it first doesn't succeed, try again. 8 surviving Jagdpanzers are sent from Morschek and 10 Panzer IVs and a couple of Panthers from Bullingham. Jagdpanzers do crunch the US infantry line and they just roll over one 57mm anti-tank gun. But again, US artillery and small arms keeps the Panzer Grenadiers away. This leaves the armour isolated, very much at the mercy of bazooka teams in the fog. You can just imagine what it must have been like being a German crew in this. You can see diddly squat. You haven't a clue what's going on. You're being marauded by bazooka teams. This is going horribly wrong. Everyone's brewing up left, right, and centre.
But if you're crass, you've got to keep going, haven't you? You've got to keep pushing. So not only are those men in that desperate situation, but they're under this relentless pressure to carry on and to try again. So on the morning of the 21st at 3 o'clock in the morning, another attack goes in with the massed remaining armour, grenadiers, 4 artillery battalions. Then 1 tank gets lost in the fog, the point I made earlier about missing your start line. So they try again at 6:25 and the lead Panthers and the Jagdpanther are knocked out by 57mm anti-tank gunfire. They do knock out the remaining anti-tank guns that are defending the Morschek Road. They reach the manor. 8 Panzer IVs reach the manor with some infantry support, but they're all killed by Battalion HQ staff and 2 Shermans. And 2 Panzer IVs are destroyed in a point-blank duel. So that they might be able to get into the village, but there's nothing they can do once they get there, which is a sort of repeat of the Krinkelt-Rockerat twin village battle, isn't it? It's all very well getting there, but once you're there, your problems are multiplied.
Well, yeah, because so finally they get Don Bütgenbach, but so what?
Yeah, exactly.
It's your line. I mean, you then got to progress from Don Bütgenbach. There's no point taking it if you're then not going to be able to exploit it. So this final assault does rip a hole in the 26th Infantry defence, but US artillery then comes home to roost, and absolutely hammers the Germans. They can't exploit at all, and yet again another panzer attack with these ever diminishing numbers of panzers and armour that 12 SS has got on the south side of Don Bütgenbach. That is stopped dead around 10 a.m. on the 21st. Fighting continues, but then the M10s knock out several panzers in quick succession, and then the big boys turn up. 4 M36 Jacksons with their 90mm anti-tank gun from the 613th Tank Destroyer Battalion. They hunt down the remaining Panzer IVs. Only 1 Panzer IV gets away.
Jeepers.
The final failed attack. It finally makes Krass realise that Rollbarn C to Liège is dead to them. This is the end of the entire northern thrust. And by this time on the 21st of December, of course, Piper's already come to a halt as well. He's in kind of desperately trying to push on from La Gleize and getting absolutely nowhere. At Don Bütgenbach, the 12 SS loses the Hitler Jugend Division, loses 1,200 men, of which 782 are killed in action. And from an already depleted division, that's a big lot. But where the big losses are in the actual vehicles. So 32 out of 41 Panthers, 12 out of 33 Panzer IVs, 14 Jagdpanthers, and 18 out of 26 Jagdpanzers. So 60% of all their armour is lost.
Yeah, but Jim, German armour's a lot better than American armour. Remember that.
Yeah, and meanwhile to the north, having pulled back from the Twin Villages and Würzfeld on the night of the 18th of December, the northern half of the Elsenborn Ridge is being attacked by the Germans. 12 SS has now been replaced by the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division and 277 Volks Grenadier Division. 3rd Panzer Grenadier, people who've listened to the Italy series might remember them from Salerno and the Battle for Rome and Cassino, etc., etc. They've just been moved up out of Italy. Defence here is mainly by the US 2nd Infantry Division, who had come down to the rescue of the 99th, find themselves under sustained German artillery fire and struggling to maintain communications with wire broken and so on almost as soon as it's laid or repaired. But they do hold on and they're giving it back harder than the Germans are giving in terms of artillery fire.
Yeah.
And further back, just along the ridge, is Camp Elsenborn. And you may remember we kind of drove past that.
Yeah.
And it's a proper camp with sort of brick buildings and so on. And dressing stations have been set up there. And this is where kind of exhausted GIs are sort of going back. But by this point, the rumours of SS massacres are starting to really, really take root.
Yeah.
And on the ridge, you have not only the 2nd Infantry Division, but also the remnants of the 99th who've kind of fallen back through the Kronkeltenwald. And they're digging in. You know, it's absolutely miserable. It's cold. Everyone's damp and wet, and they've got headaches, and, you know, they're feeling miserable and eating K rations and all the rest of it. No matter how bad it is for the American defenders, it's worse for the Germans.
Yeah.
And 3rd Panzer Grenadier and the 27th Volksgrenadier Division are attacking and just getting absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
And the commanding officer of the 277th Volksgrenadier Division goes, "The concentrated enemy fire from the Elsenborn area was so strong that all roads leading to the front and all assembly areas were covered. All our attacks brought to a standstill."
It's 8 artillery battalions, isn't it, that are operating at this point?
Yeah, so that's 8 times 24.
Yeah.
You know, that's you know, you're getting on for the best part of 200 guns.
Yeah, and they're firing
including
10,000
long
rounds,
toms.
10,000 rounds a day to break this up. So, you know, if this is a gamble by Hitler, and I think we've agreed long ago that it ain't, the deck is impossibly stacked against him. Put it that way.
Yeah, you'd have to say so. And you know, one of the other problems is that the long-range American artillery is you know, it's getting 10 miles to the German rear. You know, they just can't bring stuff forward. I mean, they just can't move. Yeah. And I hope what is completely clear here in episode 6 of our series on the Battle of Bulge is that the northern thrust, the most important thrust, the main thrust, has completely failed.
Yeah.
You know, it has just got nowhere. You know, what we're talking about here on the Elsenborn Ridge is, you know, 5 or 6 miles from the start line.
Yes, that was what's striking about it, is when we went there, as you said at the beginning of this half, we had to drive round to get to it. And it's a long drive round, but you end up not really very far away at all from the start line once you've gone all the way round the side roads and all that. And this is a small area where they come undone. You know, small areas are easier to deliver concentrated artillery fire to as well. It's German intentions have offered American targets is basically the truth of it.
Yeah.
You would say, wouldn't you, that Hörsnebel's lost here?
Yeah, I think it is. Because it doesn't matter how far they're going in with 5th Panzer Army, there isn't enough. Yeah. You know, so it's sort of irrelevant, really. I mean, you know, we'll get on to the Siege of Bastogne in the next episode. It's an epic battle, but it's also sort of, it doesn't really it does add up to a hill of beans, but, you know, on another level it doesn't, because the main thrust, and the northern thrust, has already been broken up.
But it's where the journalists are, which is what matters. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with the defence east of St. Vith. See you in a moment. Welcome back to Weird Ways of Making You Talk, episode 6 of our Battle of the Bulge series, the sprawling epic, an American epic, I think it's fair to say. Although we did have a dash of Monty in the first half, for those of you
and
missing Carol Mather, missing our favourite field marshal. I mean, one of the interesting things about that is until Ike gets his 5th star and is a general of the army, as the Americans call it, because they don't have field marshals, he's actually outranked by Montgomery, isn't he? Technically, which is
technically.
Part of the weirdness of the SHAEF command structure. Anyway, east of St. Vith.
So let's just orientate people very quickly. So you've got this northern corridor. Right up in the north is the Elsenborn Ridge. Then you've got, you know, just south of that, you've got Bütgenbach. Just south of that, you've got the kind of the thrust by Kampfgruppe Piper. All that northern thrust is using the Lossheim Graben, part of the Lossheim Gap. Yeah. South of the Lossheim Gap is Schönberg, where the 106th were getting surrounded. Yeah. And just west of that is the key town of St. Vith, which sits on this kind of slight rise, then drops down and then is surrounded by hills. So it's like a sort of like a dome of a kind of curved shield or something. Yeah. And I suppose from Bütgenbach to St. Vith is, you know, what are you talking about? 10 or 12 miles, something like that.
It's not far.
It's not far. It's not far. This is the next major bit to the south. Just north of it is the border between the 6th Panzer Army and the 5th Panzer Army. But this does fall into the realms of the 5th Panzer Army.
So it's von Manteuffel.
Von Manteuffel, who's not had a barrage to start off with, who's gone and out on foot and is a wily old panzer commander.
And a smarter soldier than Sepp Dietrich.
But frankly, not getting much further.
Well, I was just going to say, but so what?
And this story is also one of many, many meanwhiles. So,
good luck, everybody. Going in.
So meanwhile, maybe we can post up some maps, but it's a really good idea. Maybe if you're walking the dog, it's a bit tricky, but when you're listening to this. But having a quiet moment to yourself with Google Earth, I would highly recommend.
Well, if you think of the area as your hand, right? Of the bulge as your hand. The northern ridge, and you've got your hand clasp with your thumb tight to your hand.
The thumb is the Elsenborn Ridge.
Yeah, exactly. Your thumb is the Elsenborn Ridge. So that battle we've just been talking about is the thumb. Your index finger is kind of Piper. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's no middle finger. Not really.
No, that's gone.
That's gone. And there's not really a little finger. But basically, St. Vith is sort of in the middle of the palm of your hand, isn't it? Relatively.
Yes. So St. Vith is actually further, if you're drawing a line, it's kind of further west than Elsenborn Ridge.
Yeah. So it's sort of where the knuckle is on your middle finger.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to
help
so
you
that
out
people
here,
can
guys.
look at their hand. So people can look at their hand and visualize just roughly without needing a map.
Anyway, so that's where we're talking about now.
Yeah. And the thing is obviously this indicates how disorganized they are really, because St. Vith's really important, but it is by the boundary between the two armies. So although it's really important, they've offered themselves a disorganized way of approaching it, haven't they?
Yeah.
Which further compounded by the fact the Americans have decided to fight them, which is not what they were expecting. And Dietrich's already, von Manteuffel thinks that Dietrich's attacking on too narrow a front, and that some of 6th Panzer Army are taking some of his routes, which is churning the roads up and creating chaos. But there's also chaos on the main road from St. Vith from Schönberg. Schönberg is where Kurt Vonnegut was surrendering, if you remember.
Yeah, so that's where the two regiments, the 422nd and 423rd of the 106th Infantry Division, that's where they're surrendering, just kind of around that neck of the woods. And the road from Schönberg to St. Vith is a windy old thing, but from a distance, it's basically running kind of east to west. And it's about 6 miles from Schönberg.
But most importantly, it's within range of American long-range artillery.
Yes.
So, you know.
But it's just got too much weight of traffic again on a kind of sort of, and it has to be remembered that although there was a dollop of snow in the second week of December, that is gone. It is not snowing at this point on the 19th of 20th December. It is cold, but it is wet and soggy.
Yeah. And the roads aren't frozen. So it's not like that thing of hard roads, a hard mud that means a tank can make its way, is it? That's the other thing.
No, exactly. And listeners may remember that the decision was made that the relief from the 7th Armoured Division and the 9th Armoured Division, it was coming, inevitably it arrives in drips and drabs. It doesn't come as one huge, great big division. And the decision was made not to try and break through and relieve the 106th. It was to defend St. Vith as long as possible. So what you've got defending the main road from Schönberg to St. Vith, just to the east of St. Vith, only literally a mile out of town, because basically what happens is the road comes out of St. Vith, it drops down into the valley, then climbs up again onto a kind of wooded ridgeline, and the road runs through these woods. That's where they're kind of doing their major defence. And Brigadier General Bob Hasbrook, who is the commander of the 7th Armoured Division, is covering this northern part of this thrust by 5th Panzer Army, with 9th Armoured Division covering the southern part. So 9th Armoured Division are covering a kind of fallback of the 424th Infantry Regiment, which was the 3rd Regiment of the 106th Infantry Division.
Yeah.
Got it, everyone?
Yeah. Well, the other two are in the bag. That's the thing to remember.
Yeah, that's everything. So we've only got to deal with one regiment now.
What's left of 106th?
Yeah. So having decided not to go and rescue the 106th, it's all about setting up your defence lines and yet more blocking positions. So the sporadic fighting on the 19th, and the decision is made by Mördl, who is the overall commander of this, with Manteuffel, that the Führerbegleitbrigade Brigade, which is an armoured reserve brigade, so larger than a regiment, it's sort of larger than a combat command, but similar sort of principle, all arms of armoured infantry, panzers, tank destroyers, or SP guns.
And yet another unintegrated elite, inverted commas, its own mobilised set of people, all that, isn't it? That's the thing.
Exactly. But anyway, the Führerbegleitbrigade Brigade has now been attached from Army Group Reserve to the 5th Army and is told to kind of circle around to the north of St. Vith. So that is heading up. But also at the same time is the 9th SS, Panzer Division, which is part of 6th Panzer Army, which is part of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, is also moving northwest. So there is a kind of potential clash of armies here where they're both trying to use the same roads if they're not careful. So 9th SS is moving on a kind of, is heading north of St. Vith towards sort of Recht and Poteau.
Yep.
And this is where Combat Command B of the 7th Armoured Division is protecting the northern part of St. Vith and the eastern part of St. Vith, with 9th Armoured Division to the south.
Yeah.
So it's like a sort of like a lozenge shape, I would say.
Yes.
That's how to think of it.
There's a great clash here with the Greyhound.
Yes, it's actually not a Tiger, it's a Panzer IV. I've been reliably informed. Of course. Well, think about it. A Greyhound taking out a Tiger, that's sort of stretching things, isn't it?
Well, so, if I were in that Greyhound, I'd say it was a Tiger.
Yeah.
It's the same old.
It's the old from a distance.
but and in the heat of the
looks
moment,
like a tiger, and let's go big.
Yeah, in the heat of the moment and all that. That's an interesting encounter, isn't it? Because the Greyhound is a rum piece of kit. It's a 6-wheeled armoured car that's good on clear roads, but only has a 37mm gun. So, he's got to get very close to knock out another tank, and from behind. The Greyhound is one of the vehicles that at the Poitou ambush, there are lots of them on fire because they're not very well armoured and they're not very well provisioned for combat, actually. But there you go.
Cool.
He proves up what he says is a tiger. You got to give it full cred to the crew there.
Yeah. They're very, very cool, though. Rabbi Rob, Rob Thomas, who we had on the podcast a year and a half ago, he's got one.
Is he?
Yeah. World War II armour.
They're very sexy, aren't they? 6 wheels.
Really, really good. Yeah. I just absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But it's quite quiet around here on the 19th and 20th. So the Germans are trying to organise themselves. So the Begleit Brigade to the north, Volksgrenadiers are spreading out, artillery being brought forward. What's interesting, though, most of this is horse-drawn. Yep. So there's another issue for the Germans. I suppose you're not going to run out of petrol.
No, you might run out of hay.
You might run out of hay.
Still need to be fed.
Yeah, exactly.
Fed and fueled.
Yeah. And on the American side, you've got 2 armoured field battalions of artillery already in place. But on the 19th, 2 long-tom batteries arrive. So some proper heavy metal to deal with the Germans.
So that's 8 of them, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's range as well. There's the other thing about the long... Yes, it's a heavier projectile, but its range is the actual thing. So your ability to interdict further back in German lines is like multiplied enormously. By the 19th, the night of the 19th, there's a perimeter around St. Vith of the 112th Infantry of the 28th Division to the south, plus some 424th people, and Combat Command B of the 9th.
Yes.
Plus 7th Armoured Units and stragglers. And there's this quote you've found in the official history. It's absolutely fascinating.
Isn't it? It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to say it?
Go on. Do it justice.
The homogeneity of the battalion in American practice of basic tactical unit largely ceased to exist, nor did time and the enemy ever permit any substantial regrouping to restore this unity. It is surprising that under the circumstances, control and communication functioned as well as they did. So, there you go. Everyone goes on and on and on and on about the brilliance and tactical flexibility of the German Kampfgruppe.
Yeah.
This task forces, teams that they put together are combined armed forces that the Americans are putting together.
Yeah.
And they do so with an incredible speed and alacrity and agility. And the commanders just seem to grip it, even though a lot of the units that are under this new command aren't familiar with that. And it just works.
Well, he says it is surprising that under the circumstances control. Is it surprising, really, when you consider what the American army is at this stage of the war? We've talked about this a lot on the podcast over the years. It's the American army springs from an edict on the 1st of September 1939 from Roosevelt with Marshall and is birthed in anticipation of an emergency.
Yep.
It's a global emergency that America's not yet involved in, but is essentially then, as they're doing that, the architects of the American army are reorganizing it, rebooting it, building it in the image that they then want to command it in. So I don't think it is a surprise that he talks about the homogeneity.
No, I don't either. The American US Army is the best in the world, bar none, by this stage of the war. It's just a fact. The British Army and Canadians, I would argue, are really not far behind. I don't think you can put the Red Army in the same category because they're too hastily cobbled together and just flung into the front line. They've got their grand tactics, the deep battle and all the rest of it. But at a micro level, I don't think Red Army troops could organise themselves in quite the same way with the same alacrity that Americans and British. But the Americans are just the best, and this is their proving ground, really. Anyway.
Well, hang on, because he says the homogeneity of the battalion. Yeah, fine, but it's the homogeneity of the American army that's important here.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, completely. completely. And you know, those long months and years of training are kicking in. That's the truth of it, and doing those maneuvers and all the rest of it. Late on the 19th, there's not an awful lot of fighting on the 19th, and there's not an awful lot of fighting on the 20th either, as the Germans are trying to organise themselves. They recognise that there's these blocking positions, they're under attack all the time, they're really struggling to get things forward, they just can't move with the speed that they want to. And they also know that if they're going to take St. Vith, which is clearly quite heavily defended now, they're going to have a concentrated, concerted attack. And that just takes time to organise in these conditions at this time of year on these very, very poor road networks. So there's just no other way around it. But late on the 19th of the 20th, the Führerbegeit Brigade does make its first attack to the north of St. Vith, and only with infantry and the self-propelled guns that they've got, because the rest of the brigade hasn't arrived. But they do capture Ober-Emels and Nieder-Emels, and these are their jump-off positions for a further attack south on St. Vith, which is what's planned. Also, by the 20th of December, part of this new command that's come in with Monty taking over the northern shoulder is seeing the 17th Airborne Corps under Matthew Ridgway also come in. And 7th Armoured Division now moves from Middleton's 8th Corps into the 17th Airborne Corps. So a change of command at this point, which is not significant on the 20th, but will become significant as we will see.
Yes.
So on the 21st of December, at a time when St. Vith is supposed to have been taken on day 1, and here you are on, day 6?
Yeah.
X+6. They're finally kind of ready to launch their attack. So the sector east of St. Vith, either side of the main road to Cherbourg, is held by Task Force Fuller, which is commanded by Lieutenant Colonel William H.G. Fuller. He's got 38th Armoured Infantry Battalion, 4 troops of armoured infantry. He's got Troop B of the 87th Reconnaissance Squadron. He's got 400 men combined from the 81st and 168th Engineer Combat Battalions, who are now absolutely in an infantry role. He's got 1 tank company and 1 platoon of 90mm M36 Jacksons, which is frankly what anyone wants. In circumstances like this when you're fighting a defensive battle. And we've been up there, haven't we? And you can still see clear as day the scrapes and remains of foxholes, whole rows of them just to the kind of south of the main road in the woods there. I mean, it's just a fascinating place to visit. The German frontal attacks are to be mounted by the 18th Volksgrenadier Division and the 62nd Volksgrenadier Division, which of course were the 2 original attacking divisions on the morning of the 16th of December when the battle begins. Now, Fuller's men do hold out, but are later on overrun in darkness, and St. Vith is overrun that night. But just to stress again, it is now 6 days. It's X+6 before they take it. And they don't take it till the 21st. So it's actually going to be X+7 by the time they're ready to move from St. Vith. Yeah. And St. Vith is going to become, congestion central, of course. Also on that day, the 21st, Oberst Otto Rehmer, who is the commander of the Führerbegeit Brigade, once he's got to Nieder-Emels, he's ordered a drive south straight into, he's been told to go straight into St. Vith, but he just thinks that's going to be an absolute mash-up. It's a terrible idea because I'm going to get there, street's going to be clogged, this is not the way to do it. The traffic's going to be absolutely intense. So he thinks, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push on round and let the troops coming from Schoenberg take St. Vith, and I'll just manoeuvre around to the north of it and try and get in behind the town. And actually, this is a very sensible decision. Yeah. But it's also a sign of the fact that he's a personal Hitler favourite. He's one of the people who's been involved in foiling the Stauffenberg plot, so he can do no wrong. And so he just basically ignores his orders from above and just does what he wants. And so he instead decides to focus on an attack on Roth, which is this village just to the west of St. Vith, kind of nestling on the slopes of a hill overlooking the town. And it's just south of the main road between St. Vith and Wilsam. He also recognises that just off this road, the road passes through quite thick forest again, which makes it quite easy to penetrate. Most of his armour hasn't arrived at this point, so he's sending through kind of panzer grenadiers. And on the 21st of December, he sends a large combat patrol to recce possible routes to Wilsam through the woods and might be able to give him some cover, in the fire breaks for his panzers, because he doesn't want to go down the road because he knows that the main road is going to be protected by 7th Armoured Division. So they head southwest of Roth and to the village of Hindenhausen, which is kind of southwest of St. Vith. And there they get fired on by the 275th Field Artillery Battalion, which of course have been supporting all the efforts to the east of St. Vith, and by 50 caliber quads. And of course, as we've already discussed, those 50 caliber quads, these are 4 50 caliber machine guns mounted on half tracks, are absolutely lethal in a ground attack role. So the patrol comes back, says, actually, Roth is fairly weakly defended. I think we can do it. So at around 2 a.m. on the early morning of the 22nd of December, so So St. Vith is, German troops are moving into St. Vith at this same moment. The Führer Brigade attacks the village of Roth, which is mainly defended by cooks and drivers and echelon troops. But they put up a really, really good battle. Yeah. And that battle rages for 9 hours.
Yeah, they hold them up.
Sucks in 25 panzers, which have now arrived. The Führer Brigade, these tanks are struggling due to the mud. And Sherman's of the Combat Command B of the 7th Armoured Division also join in the fight. And it just turns into another of these incredibly debilitating, attritional and time-sapping battles that, frankly, the Führer Brigade can't really afford to fight.
Yeah.
So at this point on the 22nd, General Ridgway, who is now commanding overall command because of 17th Airborne Corps. He's commanding the 7th Armoured Division and orders these sort of these fortified goose eggs, which is the kind of, if you imagine what a goose egg looks like, you have this sort of circular little defensive position. It's not a joined up line, but this is very much in keeping with airborne operations.
Yeah.
And the whole point about armoured defence is it needs to be flexible. You need to be able to kind of come and go as you like. And so Clark and Hasbrouck are absolutely horrified by this. Clark is the commander of Combat Command B. Hasbrouck is the commander of 7th Armoured. And fortunately, there's a British liaison officer at Hasbrouck's command post who reports this to Monty, who promptly overrules Ridgway, tells Hasbrouck, "You've accomplished your mission, a mission well done. It is time to withdraw." And so they do.
Yeah, they do. And that's interesting that they see the wisdom in that order. I think is fascinating.
Yes, and actually Ridgway takes it on the chin, actually.
Yeah.
He actually gets on okay with Monty. And the key thing is that what you need is, if you're going to withdraw, you need your next defensive line to be kind of up and running. And this holding on to St. Vith and the area around, although St. Vith has gone on the 21st, the battles continue to the west of St. Vith, holding up the advance of 5th Panzer Army to the west of St. Vith on the 22nd of December. And in that time, the 82nd Airborne is able to move up to the next defensive position, which is the River Meuse, which runs again on a sort of roughly kind of north-south. It sort of obviously it wiggles. And that then allows 7th Armoured Division and the remnants of the defence of St. Vith to kind of pull back through that kind of escape corridor.
Really, St. Vith is absolutely central to the Battle of the Bulge. I mean, we've said how it's defeated in the northern thrust, that Herr Snabel fails there. Yep. But at St. Vith, its fate is sort of sealed, really, isn't it? They've got no options. It's also, I mean, the other thing about St. Vith is it's a direct railhead to Germany, so you need to hold it for that reason as much as anything else.
Yeah, but what it's done is it's bought time, and time is what the Germans can't afford. And also, the weather gods are obviously shining on the Allies, because the night of the 22nd, 23rd, which is when they're completely pulling out of this position, they're still fighting on the 22nd. That fighting around Roth, the village of Roth, goes on all the way through to up until the kind of early afternoon. Yeah. It's 9 hours of fighting. And then it freezes. The sky's clear, the big Russian freeze, which is blown in from the east, the beast from the east, arrives, and that freezes the ground, which enables the absolutely churned up ground in this sort of hilly landscape to the west of St. Vith. It enables the Americans to pull back very clearly. It also allows the Germans to pull up as well. But at this moment, it is more advantageous to the Allies, the Americans, pulling out quickly to the west and behind the River Meuse than it does to the Germans, who are still sort of catching up and clogged on the Schönberg Road. So St. Vith really is an absolute epic, and is one of the kind of key engagements to the whole battle, and it just derails von Teufel's attack. So that is basically the northern corridor to all intents and purposes.
And done. Where are we going in the next episode, Jim?
The next episode, we're going to Bastogne.
Yes, we will be heading south once more to have a proper look at what happens at Bastogne, where a column of vehicles that's, I think, 150 kilometres long of the 101st Airborne has been sent.
Yes.
And we will find out what happens to them. Is it the same as in Band of Brothers? Watch this space. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. You can listen to all these in one big lump if you join our Officer Class Apple podcast channel, or subscribe to We Have Ways Patreon, or better still, come and see us in the autumn at We Have Ways Fest at Black Pit Brewery from the 12th to the 14th of September this year, where we putting together the list of speakers. It's a bulging sack of war waffle, let's put it that way. We hope to see you there. Thanks very much for listening. Next episode, Bastogne.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.